The humiliating invitation. The September rain hammered against the tall windows of Westbrook Manor, creating rivers of silver that distorted the city lights beyond. Inside the grand study, Julian Westbrook sat behind his mahogany desk, barely listening to the boisterous laughter of his childhood friends who had invaded his sanctuary for their monthly poker game. Julian was 34 years old, devastatingly handsome with sharp features and steel-gray eyes that could freeze anyone mid-sentence. He had built his fortune from the ground up, transforming a small property investment into a billion-dollar empire. But success had cost him something precious. He had forgotten how to feel. "Come on, Julian, you cannot possibly attend the Ashford Charity Gala alone again," Thomas Richardson said, dealing cards with practiced ease. Thomas came from old money, the kind that required no effort, only inheritance. "Why not?" Julian replied coolly, studying his hand without real interest. "I have attended alone for 3 years. Nobody seems to care." "That is because nobody expects anything different from the Ice Prince of Chicago," laughed Gregory Blackwood, another friend whose family wealth came from pharmaceutical companies. "You have turned coldness into an art form." The third man at the table, Vincent Crane, leaned back with a cruel smile playing at his lips. Vincent had always been the instigator, the one who pushed boundaries for entertainment. "I have an idea that would make this year's gala absolutely unforgettable." Julian raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence often revealed more than questions. "Bring your maid," Vincent said, his smile widening. "That tiny girl who creeps around here like a mouse." "What is her name?" "Rosie? Rachel?" "Rosalie," Julian corrected automatically, then immediately regretted giving Vincent the satisfaction. The room exploded with laughter. Thomas nearly choked on his whiskey. "That is brilliant. Can you imagine the looks on everyone's faces? The mighty Julian Westbrook walking in with his cleaning lady. It would be the scandal of the season," Gregory added, wiping tears from his eyes. "Victoria would absolutely lose her mind." At the mention of his ex-fiancée, Julian's jaw tightened. Victoria Ashford had left him 2 years ago, claiming he was too cold, too distant, too focused on work. She had married a politician within 6 months and now spent her time hosting charity events and judging everyone who attended. Pride was a dangerous thing. Julian knew this. He had built his entire life on controlling his emotions, on never letting anyone see him rattled. But something about their mocking laughter, about the way they assumed he would never do anything unexpected, ignited something dark inside him. "Fine," he heard himself say. "I will take her." The laughter stopped abruptly. 3 pairs of eyes stared at him in disbelief. "You are joking," Thomas said slowly. "Do I look like I am joking?" Julian's voice was ice. "I will take Rosalie Hart to the Ashford Charity Gala as my guest. And we will see who has the last laugh." Vincent's smile returned, sharper than before. "This I have to see. $1,000 says you back out before Friday." "Make it 5,000, Julian countered. "And prepare to lose." After his friends left, still chuckling about his supposed joke, Julian remained alone in his study. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle. He poured himself a glass of bourbon but did not drink it. Instead, he stared at his reflection in the window, wondering what madness had possessed him. Downstairs, in the servants' wing of the massive house, Rosalie Hart was finishing her evening duties. At 26 years old, she was small and delicate, with honey-colored hair she kept pulled back in a practical bun and warm brown eyes that seemed too large for her face. She moved through the manor like a ghost, completing her tasks efficiently and silently, always trying to be invisible. Invisibility was survival. She had learned that lesson growing up in foster care, bouncing between homes where children were burdens rather than blessings. When she aged out of the system at 18, she had nothing but a high school diploma and a desperate need to survive. For 8 years, she had worked as a maid, saving every penny to support herself and send money to her younger foster brother Daniel, who was studying engineering at a community college. Julian Westbrook paid well, better than any previous employer, and she could not afford to lose this job. She was carrying fresh linens to the guest rooms when she heard voices drifting from the study. She did not mean to eavesdrop, but her name stopped her in her tracks. That tiny girl who creeps around here like a mouse. What is her name? Her cheeks burned with humiliation. They were talking about her. She pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing. Then she heard Julian's voice, cold and final. "You will be my guest." Rosalie's heart hammered against her ribs. Guest? That made no sense. She was staff, invisible staff. Why would he want her at a charity gala? 10 minutes later, Julian found her in the hallway. His gray eyes swept over her, and for a moment, she thought she saw something flicker there. Regret? Guilt? But it vanished so quickly she must have imagined it. "Friday night," he said without preamble. "The Ashford Charity Gala. You will accompany me. Be ready at 7. "Sir, I do not understand," Rosalie whispered. "I am not qualified for such an event. I would not know how to behave." "You will behave exactly as you always do," Julian replied. "With quiet dignity. That is all that is required." "But sir, I have nothing appropriate to wear." "I cannot possibly." "That is not your concern. A stylist will arrive Thursday afternoon with suitable options." His tone left no room for argument. "This is not a request, Miss Hart. Consider it part of your duties." Then he walked away, leaving Rosalie standing alone with an armful of linens and a growing sense of dread. That night, unable to sleep, Rosalie sat on her narrow bed in the staff quarters and opened the old trunk that held her few personal possessions. At the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, was a dress. Navy blue silk with delicate pearl beading along the neckline. It had belonged to her mother, the one thing she had been allowed to keep when social services came. She held it up to the dim light. It was old-fashioned but elegant, carefully preserved. Her mother had worn it to her own engagement party, back when happiness seemed possible. Rosalie made a decision. If she had to attend this gala, if she had to be paraded around as some kind of joke she did not yet understand, she would do it on her own terms. She would wear her mother's dress. She would walk in with her head high. If they wanted to mock her, fine. But she would give them no satisfaction. She would show them what real dignity looked like, the Queen's arrival. Friday arrived far too quickly. Rosalie spent the morning completing her regular duties, scrubbing floors and changing sheets while her stomach twisted itself into knots. When the stylist arrived at 2 o'clock with racks of expensive gowns, Rosalie politely declined them all. "I have my own dress," she said quietly. "But thank you." The stylist, a sharp-eyed woman named Margot, looked skeptical until Rosalie showed her the navy blue gown. Margot's expression transformed immediately from dismissal to professional interest. "This is exquisite," she breathed, running expert fingers over the pearl beading. "Vintage, probably 1960s. The craftsmanship is extraordinary. Where did you get this?" "It was my mother's," Rosalie said softly. Margot nodded slowly. "Then we will make it perfect. Let me work my magic." For the next 3 hours, Margot transformed Rosalie. The dress was carefully steamed and fitted. Margot loosened Rosalie's honey-colored hair from its severe bun, letting it fall in soft waves down her back. She applied makeup with a light hand, enhancing Rosalie's natural features rather than covering them. Simple pearl earrings completed the look. When Rosalie finally looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back at her looked elegant, confident, beautiful. For just a moment, she allowed herself to feel it. "You look like a queen," Margot said with satisfaction. "Walk like one tonight. Make them remember you." At exactly 7 o'clock, Rosalie descended the grand staircase. Julian was waiting in the foyer, impossibly handsome in a tailored black tuxedo. When he looked up and saw her, he froze. Something flickered across his face, something that looked almost like shock, maybe even regret. But he recovered quickly, his expression settling back into its usual cool mask. "You look acceptable," he said, offering his arm with mechanical politeness. "Thank you, sir," Rosalie replied, placing her hand lightly on his arm. She could feel the tension in his muscles, the rigid control he maintained over himself. The drive to the Ashford Grand Hotel was silent. Julian stared out the window, jaw clenched, while Rosalie focused on breathing steadily. She kept reminding herself why she was here. This was a job. Nothing more. She would survive tonight, and tomorrow everything would return to normal. But when the car pulled up to the red carpet entrance and Julian helped her out, Rosalie realized nothing would ever be normal again. The moment her feet touched the red carpet, cameras began flashing. Reporters shouted questions. Other guests arriving for the gala stopped mid-step, staring openly. "Mr. Westbrook. Who is your companion?" "Julian. Is this your new girlfriend?" "Miss. What is your name?" Rosalie kept her head high, her hand steady on Julian's arm, her expression serene despite the chaos. She had spent years being invisible. Tonight, she would embrace the opposite. She would be so visible they would never forget her. They walked through the entrance together. The Ashford Grand Hotel ballroom was breathtaking, all crystal chandeliers and marble columns, filled with Chicago's wealthiest elite dripping in diamonds and designer labels. But when Rosalie entered, the entire room seemed to pause. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. Every eye in the room turned toward the entrance, toward the mysterious woman in the vintage navy gown who moved with the grace of royalty. Julian felt the shift immediately. This was not what he had planned. He had expected to walk in with his shy, nervous maid, to endure some light embarrassment, to prove a point to his mocking friends. Instead, Rosalie had transformed into something extraordinary. She was not cowering or apologizing for her presence. She was owning it. "Julian Westbrook," a cold voice cut through the crowd. "What a surprise to see you here." Victoria Ashford glided toward them, resplendent in a gold gown that probably cost more than most people's cars. She was beautiful in a calculated way, everything perfectly arranged, from her platinum blonde hair to her practiced smile. But next to Rosalie's natural elegance, Victoria suddenly looked overdone, trying too hard. "Victoria," Julian acknowledged with a slight nod. "Lovely event as always." Victoria's ice-blue eyes swept over Rosalie with barely concealed disdain. "And who is your companion? I do not believe we have been introduced." Before Julian could respond, Rosalie extended her hand with perfect grace. "Rosalie Hart. It is a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Crane." Victoria's smile turned sharp. She ignored Rosalie's hand. "Hart. I do not recognize that name among Chicago's families." "What does your father do, dear?" The insult was deliberate. "In this world, your worth was measured by your family name, your father's business, your social connections." Victoria was trying to put Rosalie in her place, to expose her as an outsider. But Rosalie met her gaze steadily, her voice gentle but unwavering. "I am not defined by my father's occupation, Mrs. Crane. I define myself by my own character and actions. I have found that to be far more reliable." Several people nearby, who had been pretending not to listen, suddenly became very interested in their champagne. Someone coughed to hide a laugh. Victoria's face flushed with anger. "How quaint. Julian, might I have a word with you privately?" "Actually," Rosalie said before Julian could respond, "I believe I see refreshments. Please excuse me." She removed her hand from Julian's arm with quiet dignity and walked away, leaving him alone with his ex-fiancée. As Rosalie moved through the crowd, something miraculous happened. People parted for her. Not because they knew who she was, but because of how she carried herself. She had no family name, no fortune, no connections. But she had something far more powerful: authentic confidence. At the refreshment table, a distinguished older gentleman with silver hair approached her. "That was magnificently handled," he said with genuine warmth. "Victoria Ashford has needed someone to stand up to her for years. Allow me to introduce myself. Robert Sinclair." Rosalie recognized the name immediately. Sinclair Industries was one of the largest architectural firms in the country. This man was business royalty. "Rosalie Hart," she replied, accepting the champagne glass he offered her. "Tell me, Miss Hart," Robert said with interest, "what brings you into Julian Westbrook's orbit? He is not known for his social connections." Rosalie chose her words carefully. "Mr. Westbrook has been very kind to me. I am grateful for his generosity." Robert studied her with sharp, intelligent eyes. "You are being diplomatic. Admirable. Tell me, what do you do, Miss Hart? Besides clearly making Victoria Ashford uncomfortable, which I consider a public service." Despite herself, Rosalie smiled. "I work in hospitality management." It was not exactly a lie. Managing a household was a form of hospitality. "Interesting," Robert said. "My firm is actually looking for someone to manage our corporate hospitality division. It is quite a challenging position. Would you be interested in discussing it?" Rosalie's heart skipped. A real career opportunity? From a casual conversation? It seemed impossible. Across the room, Julian was having a far less pleasant conversation. "Have you lost your mind?" Victoria hissed, her perfect composure cracking. "You brought your maid to my charity gala? Do you have any idea how this looks?" "I brought a guest," Julian corrected coldly. "Her profession is irrelevant." "It is completely relevant. People are already talking. They are laughing at you, Julian. At us. This reflects badly on everyone associated with you." "Then perhaps they should reconsider what truly matters," Julian replied. "Rosalie has shown more grace in 10 minutes than most of these people display in a lifetime." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "You are defending her. My God, you actually care what I think about your cleaning lady." The truth of her words hit Julian like a physical blow. When had this stopped being a joke? When had he started seeing Rosalie not as a pawn in a petty game, but as a person whose dignity mattered? "I made a mistake," he said quietly. "Finally, you are making sense," Victoria said with satisfaction. "Go tell her you are taking her home. Make some excuse. I can smooth things over with." "No," Julian interrupted. "My mistake was not bringing her tonight. My mistake was the reason I brought her. She deserves better than to be part of some childish prank." He walked away from Victoria's shocked expression and made his way through the crowd toward Rosalie. But when he reached her, she was laughing at something Robert Sinclair was saying, completely at ease, glowing with confidence. She was not just surviving this night. She was conquering it. And Julian Westbrook realized with startling clarity that he had been completely, utterly wrong about everything. The prank had not been on Rosalie. It had been on him. Because tonight, his humble maid had walked into a room of privilege and proven that true royalty had nothing to do with money or social status. It had everything to do with character. And as he watched her shine, Julian felt something crack inside his carefully constructed walls. Something dangerous and unexpected. Something that felt terribly like respect. And perhaps, just perhaps, something even deeper.